back, everybody. I'm Sassy Pants, wife to Matty the rancher, and I'll be your storyteller today. Welcome to Adventures with Sodak Pete. Stories that celebrate the hard work, the big hearts, and wide open spaces of ranch life. Out here, every day is an adventure, and we hope each and every one of you listening can imagine yourself as little Sodak Pete, learning the ropes, getting your hands a little dirty, and helping out where it counts. So grab your boots, tip your hat, and let's see what today's adventure has in store. Sodak Pete going fishing on the ranch. The sun peeked up at Oak Creek Ranch, shining through the kitchen window. Matty and I were enjoying our coffee and about to eat breakfast when Sodak Pete and Millie came bounding into the kitchen. Pete's hat was sitting a little bit crooked and Millie's tail was thumping against the doorframe. "Good morning," Pete said, grinning wide. Pete started to eat his eggs, pancakes, and bacon, and then he leaned on the table and his eyes got wide. "Matty, do you think I could go fishing today?" Matty smiled and tipped his old cowboy hat back. "You bet. You don't need a fancy pole for that. There's some fallen branches behind the house. Make sure you pick one that's strong and straight. Then tie some fishing line on the end of it and maybe you could use a bit of hot dog for bait." Pete laughed. "Hot dogs to catch fish? That's kind of funny." I packed them a sack lunch, a peanut butter and honey sandwich, an apple, a Cheerio bar, and a few bits of hot dog. And then I sent them off for a day of adventure. Out behind the ranch house, Pete wandered beneath the trees until he spotted the perfect fallen branch. Not too thick, not too thin, and just about as tall as he was. He brushed off the dirt and he snapped away a few twigs until it felt smooth in his hands. From his pocket, he pulled a roll of fishing line that Matty had given him. He wrapped it tight around the end of the stick and tied a small hook on the end of the line. Then he cut a tiny piece of hot dog, kind of wondering, will this work? And poked it onto the hook. Millie wagged her tail and gave a soft little woof, as if to say, "Looks good to me." Pete held up his homemade pole with a proud grin. "Look at this, Millie. Let's go fishing." The little lake behind the house shimmered in the morning sun, tucked in a low spot near the pasture gate. Pete and Millie followed the worn trail through the grass. The air was fresh and sweet with wild clover. Pete found a good spot by the water and he threw out his line, the homemade pole bending just a bit as the line splashed into the water. Millie sat beside him, ears perked and tail swishing in the grass. No big fish came by, but tiny schools of shiny minnows swirled near the shore. Pete giggled as a few bright, tiny fish nibbled at his bait. He caught a couple, admired their colors glinting in the sun, and then he gently set them free again. "Not bad, Millie," he said with a grin. "I guess we're a real fisherman now." By late morning, Pete pulled in his line and stood up, brushing the dust from his jeans. "Millie, let's go see what the creek's like today," he said, swinging the fishing pole over his shoulder. Millie trotted ahead, leading the way through the pastures and down the cow path that curved toward the coulee. They crossed a little rise and spotted the creek below, quiet, shady, and cool. Pete and Millie settled under a tree beside the water and opened up the sack lunch that I'd packed. He munched on his peanut butter and honey sandwich, crunched his apple, and saved the Cheerio bar for dessert. A sack lunch sure tastes good when you're fishing," he said with a happy sigh. Millie laid nearby, keeping watch on a frog that had just plopped into the water. After lunch, Pete tossed his line into the creek a few times, hoping for a bite. But no fish were to be found, only ripples in the water, reeds, and the soft sound of water trickling over the stones. He knelt by the water's edge, peering into the clear creek. Little minnows darted between smooth rocks. Crawdads crept out from the shadows, waving their tiny claws. A turtle sunned itself on a flat stone until Millie barked and it went sliding into the water with a splash. Pete giggled and leaned close to the water. "Look, Millie, that crawdad's got pinchers big as my thumb." He dipped in his hand and gently scooped it up, laughing as it wiggled in his palm. Millie barked again and the crawdad gave a quick flick of its tail before disappearing back under a rock. They spent the afternoon exploring the creek, skipping stones, and watching frogs hop from bank to bank. Even without any fish to catch, there was plenty of fun to be had. By mid-afternoon, the sun glowed warm and golden over the hills. Pete stretched. His shirt sleeves were dusty and his straw hat was tipped low. "Well, Millie," he said, "we might not have caught supper, but we sure had a good day." He slung his fishing pole over his shoulder, and together they started the long walk back to the ranch yard. Grasshoppers bounced across the trail, and the wind carried the sound of cows lowing in the distance. Millie stayed close to Pete's side, tail wagging, slow and steady. That evening, we all sat together on the porch. Matty leaned back in his chair, and I rocked slowly in mine, listening to Pete tell all about his fishing adventures, the minnows, the crawdads, the frogs, and the turtles, and the lack of fish. Millie was curled up at his feet, tail twitching in her sleep. Pete's eyes sparkled as he talked. We didn't catch much, but it sure was a great day. Matty smiled, enjoying Pete's excitement. Sounds like you caught the best part, Pete, the fun of it. I nodded, looking out at the last bit of sun setting over the pasture. We were thankful for room to roam, fishing, a boy and his dog, and all the goodness that the Lord provides. Thanks for riding along with us today. Sodak Pete hope you join us on our next adventure.